Well, hello healers! Prepare to brace yourself because the tank nerfs that Blizzard revealed are kind of now our burden. Now, Blizzard's vision here is clear, right? It's slower, steadier healing instead of just frantic life-saving all the time and playing whack-a-mole with health bars. So what Blizzard have done is they've nerfed our output and they've buffed health pools significantly. And Blizzard's goal in all of this is healers who methodically restore health bars. No more ping-ponging between full bars and death's door and having crazy stress all the time, and then filling in the gaps by just being a weak DPS. And personally to me, this is actually really exciting. I think healing rocks when it's about strategy, it's about using your kit, and being efficient with your mana. That's exciting to me. Healing has suffered deeply from the arms race that basically led us to the role's struggles in the Dragonflight expansion. And the good news is that on the beta, testers are praising this rhythm. But they're praising it while they're not raging about lots of instant deaths from the rather overwhelming amount of dangerous dungeon mechanics. That's the thing, right? Like, yep, Mythic Plus has had its affixes pared back. That means Blizzard have put in loads more mechanics. And that could in some ways mean cool, involved dungeons you can learn and master. But the downside is it is a little bit of a shock and a lot of people are dying. Dungeons so far have been tougher and more mechanically dense than ever, so perhaps Blizzard's tuning will hit the mark, but the sheer mechanical overwhelm may still be a problem, and because of that, I do expect a bit of a teething period here. So, with that in mind, with all of this change, let's take a look at how each spec is going to be entering this new era, and if you need a bit of help deciding, check out this guide posted for our members over at bellular.games. That's where you can support us, and in return, we post our videos early, ad-free, and with tons of exclusive content, like, say, that guide, or the Lore Walking podcast. You can check out that guide, and of course, listen to the Lore Walking podcast as you are doing your things in-game, getting ready for War Within. So, check it out at bellular.games. With that said, let's get into the specs. I am thrilled to say that Holy Paladins are winners. They have finally received their long-awaited overhaul. What's happened, right, is Glimmer is gone, and that has freed up a significant amount of power that is now evenly distributed across their kit. The Holy Power Spenders, which were once like just a laughingstock, well, those have been juiced up big time, and they actually feel good. And on top of that, button bloat has been reduced, and here's a few examples of that. Divine Favor's a big one. It's now actually baked into your barrier or prism casts, and then Lights, Hammer, and Daybreak are just gone. Take Infusion procs. Well, Infusion procs are once again back to just buffing your heals. And really, if there's ever been an argument for simple being better, it actually is this, because now the focus lies on efficient spending of your holy power, and then of course min-maxing your usage of infusion procs, divine favor, and your laundry list of other spells. It actually comes together well, and all of the melee weaving stuff is still here, right? So that's still here. And look, there's a principle that's often talked about in software development. It's called KISS. Keep it simple, stupid. And if there ever has been an argument for simple just working out better, it's this. Because now the focus lies on efficient holy power spending, and then min-maxing your usage of your infusion procs, divine favor, and your laundry list of other spells. All of the melee weaving stuff is still here, and with the focus on holy power generation, it fits even better because of course your holy power spenders actually feel good now. Then we add to that their hero talents, and basically Holy Paladin's a colossal winner. So one of them, Herald of the Sun, it is just a veritable light show, and it also upgrades your Word of Glory into the Old Eternal Flame, so that's pretty sick. And then Lightsmith is a DPS and shield granting support tree that is a little bit niche in fantasy, but basically, if you love it, you'll love it. Overall, it's super positive, but not everything is perfect. The talent tree is still full of niche passives, and the lack of a full rework has left a few parts behind. As an example, abilities like Tyr's Deliverance or, say, Hammer of Wrath, they either need a second look at or just dropped entirely with that space going to something else. It's kind of weird to say it, but more pruning may actually go down a treat here, as would maybe a little bit more general utility, but still, looking past those minor gripes, Holy is absolutely popping off, so if you're a Holy Paladin, you can have a big smile on your face. Next then, Mistweavers. Congratulations, you've actually now outlived Essence Font. Yes, Essence Font is gone, and its removal, along with a few other things, kinda means your spec is finally free. So now the blend between fist weaving and casting is satisfyingly clean. So much so, right, that the Monk Discord has actually been on a little bit of a warpath, trying to kill the whole melee/ranged and fist weaving/caster terms. So that's kind of fun. Instead then, the focus is on builds based on your talent choices. You run Tear of the Morning if you're using Soothing Mist, or perhaps Rising Mist if you're using Rising Sun kicks. But either way, most of your gameplay is actually staying the same unless you're running Jadefire Stomp for the classic damage to heal conversion build, and even then actually, that's just in addition to a very, very solid core spec. All it basically took from Blizzard's end was a few talent reshuffles as well. That's pretty amazingly effective. Removing, say, Clouded Focus to add Crane Style and Pool of the Mists, those were surgically precise changes that have just led to just honestly an immaculate version of the spec. It's really good. Now, the hero talents do change that, they are a mixed bag. Conduit of the Celestials is actually fun. It's full of that colorful celestial flair with a new ability and passives that you'll definitely feel in action, so that's pretty great. But then there is the somewhat just passive and generic alternative, which is called Master of Harmony. And maybe it's one of those things where I might find it boring, maybe you will find it boring, but maybe for a lot of people, they just want some more power, but for that to mostly be passive, and maybe that's Blizzard's intent with it. But overall, Mistweaver walks out of here as a solid winner. Resto Shaman also does the same. It is a victor, and again, it's down to smart, subtle changes. As an example, you save at least one hotbar slot with Downpour, and that's because Downpour is no longer its own button. Instead, it's now a follow-up to Healing Rain. That is a slick change to basically get those mechanics in, but in a way that is less bloat, and I'd love to see Blizzard carry that through into more things. So that's really good, and then the new Tidewaters basically buffs your Healing Rain further. And then next, at long last, you guys have got a raid buff. It's called Sky Fury, and it's basically just Wind Fury plus Mastery, so that's pretty nice of you, Resto. And then a major weakness has been addressed in the form of what you've always wanted, a new personal defensive in the form of Stone Bulwark. Then their major cooldowns, Spirit Link and Ascendance, those also got some much needed upgrades here, and they're upgrades that you can actually afford because Blizzard they've taken some 2-pointer talents, they've dropped them down to 1, and they've made some key abilities baseline, which of course means that the talent tree is a lot nicer to build in. And as for the utility, well, their class tree is actually even more cracked. A bit of reshuffling has left the best spells much easier to grab, and with these changes, Resto Shaman has just evolved into a powerhouse group healer that is easy to learn but hard to master. Unfortunately though, it ain't all perfect, so on the hero talents, they're just a little bit mixed. Now, Farseer is a fun ancestor summoning time that gives your Lava Burst another charge, and it upgrades nature's swiftness, so that's pretty good. Then there's Totemic, and what Totemic does is it replaces your Healing Rain with Surging Totem, and it upgrades totems across the board. Now, obviously, totems is very, very fitting to the Shaman, but it's just not the most exciting to play. That being said, it's not like any of this makes the spec actively worse, it's maybe just a little underwhelming. And what that means is that overall, Restoration Shaman feels great, it's a lot of fun, it just works in most circumstances. There are a few little weaknesses that do persist, like the reliance on big cooldowns to snap react to danger, but overall, it's a real strong picture. Resto Druid then. So, it's been a depressing time for Druids. Every single other Druid spec has been a loser in our videos, but thankfully I can say that Resto is a winner. Let's go through some of the changes. So, Moonkin form shifting is no longer necessary for optimal damage and mana return. That's really nice. It streamlines gameplay, but it does so at the cost of Flap and Wild Charge's Leap. Now, damage itself is actually getting a solid upgrade via talents proccing Heart of the Wild once every minute, which is pretty sweet, and that comes with a new damage transfer effect that basically offers windows of blasting out your wraths or just doing some cat weaving. The next change then is kind of interesting. So the random extra rejuve proccing talent is actually gone now, but what that has actually let Blizzard do is pump the spell up by adding an additional 30% upfront components. So I actually think a lot of people will like that. Then Tranquility's actually got quite the change where it's now been shifted to being a massive upfront heal. So that's just like, man, that's fundamentally different to what that spell used to be. And instead of it just being cut in half in raid, it now uses the sort of standard logic of most big heals where it just has reduced effectiveness beyond 5 targets. The last meaningful change then is Flourish and Photosynthesis. So those actually occupy a choice node now that basically just forces a decision between 2 incredibly strong talents, which I think overall, I mean, in theory anyway, should just allow each one of those to shine and, you know, both be pretty powerful and not have, like, interchanges that end up being a balancing nightmare. One would hope. Now, one would also hope that if a class tree revamp is going on, that it would solve loads of problems. Unfortunately, those hopes are being dashed. This is not like it is with, say, the Shamans. So, there's been a revamp to the class tree, and it's weird because there's no massive improvements, but there's also no horrible downgrades. It is just a bit different. That said, though, a new highlight is the Fluid Form talent. This one will feel lovely. It allows certain abilities to automatically shift you, right? And that basically saves a GCD. So it means that, say, Rake and Shred will directly turn you into a cat, which again is just hard to understate as an improvement, because like just eating random GCDs feels shit. So yeah, GG in that change at least. Sadly though, the hero talents do disappoint a little, I would say. Keeper of the Grove's treant buffs are just not all that interesting, and Windstalker again is just a bunch of passive vines. Now it does have some nice bonuses that like more advanced druids can play around, and that does include the very excellent Control of the Dream, where it allows you to delay your major cooldowns by up to 15 seconds after they come up by taking that time off their cooldown with the next use. So basically, for most of us, probably won't be that useful, but if you're a Gigabrain, man, you're going to be able to make bank with that. Overall then, it's a decent winner, but not entirely. None of the core weaknesses were shored up, so if you don't like their ramping, if you don't like specific spell combos, or mastering the use of the Reforestation proc, probably look elsewhere. So that's it, the winners are finished, which normally would mean we're going to talk about losers. But in this case, it's not really losers. They're not winners, but they're certainly not losers. So I'll just start by talking about Holy Priest, where they've had almost no changes. Now that is because they got a bit of a rework in 10.2.6 that improved their Mythic Plus damage and their raid healing, so that was quite nice. The only thing though that they've really got is their hero talents. Thankfully, the hero talents are pretty damn good. Archon juices up your AoE healing with massive repeated Halo casts that give you instant flash heals, that's pretty sick, and Oracle is, let's just say, a bit more complicated, so it grants you Premonition. Now Premonition is a self-buff spell that rotates between 3 different effects. Those are cooldown reduction on your next spells, a big heal buff that spreads over healing, and then damage reduction to your next single target cast. Now all 3 of these are procced with every third cast, which is kind of awesome, though it will take like, a little bit of the wrinkly brain to make the best use out of it. And so that means that while this is not the winner's version of the video, if you put a gun to my head, please don't by the way, but if you did, and you said, go winner or loser, I suppose I would say it's a slight winner. Discipline Priest, well, for us it's actually about the same, except there has been a revamp to Rapture, and that is kind of big. So rather than 40% stronger shields for the next 8 seconds, instead your next 3 shields are 80% stronger. So what that basically does is it takes some of your group coverage away during ramps, but of course it is, nice beefed up targeted mitigation. Overall though, Disc is still riding high from patch 10.2's improvements. It shares the fun of the Oracle tree with Holy, and then it's got Void Weaver, and Void Weaver is just cool, man. So Smite upgrades to Void Blast after you use Mind Blast, and that opens an entropic rift under the enemy that you can then pump up with Penance before it bursts for big damage, which of course will give you lovely atonement healing. Is pretty sick. Overall then, a few minor wins and almost no losses to worry about. The existing weaknesses and challenges aren't solved, but many of those are kinda just like core to the Priest, and they're almost inherent trade-offs for the spec and class. The last one then, believe it or not, is not a loser. It's the Preservation Evoker, and it's right up the same alley as with the Priest specs. There are some minor improvements to the talent tree, which is real welcome. Some of those are things like Life Spark turning up their DPS and Spatial Paradox, giving them an option to fix up their reduced range, though only for a brief period. What's great though is the hero talent. So Flame Shaper comes in and gives you some hot gameplay via Engulf, and then Chrono Warden, well, it's kinda cool. It basically makes Empower spells automatically fire off the upgraded version of Living Flame, so basically big explosion, that's nice, and it also changes Hover into a blink-like warp, with that warp dropping little speed boost orbs for your team, so that's kinda sick. Beyond that though, it is still very much the same limited range, high IQ healer that some people hate, but others have absolutely fallen in love with, so that's pretty much that, and to bring this video to a close, well, I'd say healer does remain the role that struggles the most with overall design issues, right? Like, it's just been an ongoing, I don't want to say debate, it's just been an ongoing thing that Blizzard have been grappling with for a few years now. But these specs are bloody great, and some of the hero talents here are fantastic. I mean, this series is called Winners and Losers, and in this case that's a problem, because Winners and Slight Winners is a terrible video title. Winners and Not Losers also is a terrible video title, yet they both are accurate to this one in particular. With tanks, with ranged, with melee, there are winners, there are losers, but honestly with healers, everyone is good. At least insofar as the core spec design goes, but obviously these specs, they're really good, but they will experience contact with the enemy. And that's going to be tricky, especially in the dungeons, which are more mechanically complex. So do be prepared for a strong lean towards the more meta specs, the ones that just happen to either have a kit that is the most friendly towards the new dungeons, or is just the most overtuned. Be prepared for that kind of meta thing to happen, just because there is going to be a little bit of an adjustment period as we move into this expansion, given the overall changes to damage profiles and to tanks. But if you can get over that, I think the core class design work is absolutely stellar. And with that said, that is it for the Winners and Losers spec series. Next, we will be talking about classes overall, but if you want to review what's up for melee, for ranged, and for tanks, you can check out the full playlist here. With that said, have fun, have a great day, and I'll see you next time.